one of the deadliest structural failures in history. A shopping mall, like so many others, filled with people on their way home from work. When the unthinkable happens. "500 are killed. Hundreds more are trapped and fighting for survival. Yet there's no sign of an earthquake, no terrorist bomb, no apparent reason in the rubble. A building has simply collapsed under its own weight without any apparent warning. And the question is, what caused such a catastrophic failure? They're symbols of the modern world. Soaring structures made of concrete, steel, and glass. Every one of these gravity-defying, multi-level buildings is a marvel of engineering. And in every one of them, attention is paid to the smallest details of construction. Especially the details designed to keep them standing. When it comes to a building, what goes up should never come down. Unless it's being brought down on purpose. In a planned demolition, the support system that carries the building's weight to the ground is shattered with explosives. It isn't often a building collapses on its own. But when it does, the world takes notice. Thursday evening, June 29, 1995, in Seoul, South Korea. More than 1,000 shoppers are making a last stop at the city's ritzy Sampung shopping mall. Sampung has been standing for more than 5 years, the latest in mall designs. Every day, as many as 40,000 people pass through its many levels of luxury shops, with their lavish selection of Western goods. Most of them have never given a thought to the safety of the building around them, or imagined that its top 5 stories could suddenly come crashing down. But that's exactly what's about to happen. A few minutes before 6 p.m., there are about 1,500 people inside the building. Many of them in the underground levels, where the daily food sales are underway. They have no idea that above them, the structural integrity of the building is beginning to fail, and that thousands of tons of suspended concrete are about to encounter the law of gravity. For most shoppers, the only warning sign is a dull roar coming from above.
We heard an echoing sound, like the sound of a train coming.
In the basement, panicked customers run for cover. High above them, the 5th floor has just pulled away from the roof. As each concrete floor drops, it rips away the floor beneath it, all the way down through the 4 underground levels. It's over in less than 20 seconds. The entire north wing of the Sampung shopping mall is now a heap of broken concrete and twisted steel, covering half a city block. Parts of the store, like the side towers, which housed elevators and emergency stairs, still stand. The people inside had only seconds to escape. On the 5 upper levels, hundreds have been killed. Hundreds more are trapped beneath a mountain of smoldering debris, crying out for help. No one knows the situation on the lower levels. The news of the disaster begins to spread around the world, where builders and engineers are all asking the same question. How could it have happened?
There was no evidence of a gas explosion. There was no evidence of a terrorist bomb. There was no evidence of a plane crash. There was no evidence for a structure to perish under its own weight is a real shocker to the engineering community.
Within hours of the disaster, a team of forensic engineers arrives to look for answers. Most of them can't believe their eyes.
완전히 땅속으로 꺼져버린 상태.
It was as if the building had simply evaporated.
건물이 거기에.
For a moment, I even doubted that there was ever a building there at all. And in that moment, I was filled with a great sense of shame for my profession.
Had some flaw in the design doomed the 5-year-old building? Was it an engineering mistake? While investigators are asking those questions, the search for survivors is ramping up. Emergency workers from all over the city race to the scene. Firefighter Kyung Il-jong is one of the first to arrive.
현장에 도착해 보니까
It felt like I was looking at a scene from a war zone.
느낌을 받았습니다.
It was so brutal and devastating.
죽어 있는 사람들,
All the dead bodies.
살아 있는 사람들과 아우성.
To this day, I can still hear the screams of the survivors.
It's hard to imagine that anyone is still alive in the center of the pile. So Kyung Il and the other rescuers begin combing the edges. No one knows how many people are trapped alive in the rubble, badly injured, running out of air. Emergency crews will have to dig through tons of shifting concrete quickly. One wrong move could trigger another collapse. It's hazardous work for rescuers and victims alike. Live electrical wires snake through the site. Pieces of debris catch fire. Toxic smoke clogs the air and slows rescuers down. At this rate, they'll need days to reach the 4 basement sublevels. They have no way of knowing that at the very bottom, entombed beneath countless tons of concrete and steel, is 19-year-old Seong-young Park. Just a few minutes earlier, she'd been at her job as a sales clerk in the children's department. It was located on the 1st basement floor at the northeast end of the building. There weren't as many customers as usual, maybe because of the heat. It was summertime, and the air conditioning was off, apparently because of some trouble on the roof.
그런 소문만 있었어요. 그냥 금이
I heard rumors that they were having problems on the 5th floor and had closed it off because the roof was sagging. Nobody heard anything about the possibility that the building might collapse.
It was a little before 6, and she heard something above her that sounded like a train. Seong-young Park made a dash for the stairs, but never got there. She has no idea how much time has passed before she regains consciousness and finds herself completely hemmed in by rubble. It's almost completely dark, and she can't hear a sound. Aside from a few scrapes and bruises, she doesn't think she's been injured. So she tells herself to stay calm and wait for the rescue teams to reach her.
그렇게 무너졌을 거란 생각 못
I had
하고
no way of knowing that the whole building had collapsed. I thought it was probably just the ceiling above my own department. So I expected that I would be rescued before too long, that someone would come and pull me out.
In fact, Sung-hyung lies pinned on what remains of the first basement, near the bottom of the pile, with the weight of 5 floors above her. On the surface, rescuers are coming across more survivors and redouble their efforts. In the next few hours, they'll find even more. But they know time is running out for many of those still trapped. Watching the rescuers go about their work, the investigators are already trying to figure out what went wrong. The most obvious culprit? The concrete. It wouldn't be the first time shoddy construction materials were implicated in a building's collapse. It happened in Turkey in 1999, when the country was hit by a massive 7.4 earthquake. Roughly 100,000 buildings were destroyed, many of them constructed with poor quality concrete. At the site of the Sampong implosion, the concrete in the surviving walls looks suspiciously porous. It could be a sign the builders used too much water when it was mixed. Samples from the site are taken to the lab and subjected to extreme pressures. It holds. There's nothing wrong with the concrete. That means something else triggered the collapse. To find out what it was, investigators will have to examine Sangpong before it fell. Something must have gone wrong in the beginning to lead to such a catastrophic end. And the clues lie buried in the rubble. South Koreans are stunned as they learn the extent of the calamity at the Sangpong Shopping Center in Seoul, Korea. By the second day, it's clear that the dead will number in the hundreds, and experts the world over are mystified by what happened.
Everybody wanted to understand right away what went on. When a normal, everyday, workaday building comes down, everybody is shocked. It's rare, and it just should not happen.
Buildings like Sampong are found all over the world, and more are springing up every day. Whether they're used in an apartment house, an office, or a mall, the engineering principles that went into Sangpong's design are well known, with a proven track record. Engineers call it flat slab construction. It's an architectural workhorse, safe, relatively inexpensive, and extremely reliable.
Frankly, it is a terribly forgiving structural design to screw up. You have to work so hard to screw up a flat slab building. You have to do something really stupid.
Buildings, like human bodies, need skeletons to keep them standing. A tall building skeleton is frequently made of steel. But a flat slab building has no steel frame, just slabs of reinforced concrete resting on concrete columns. Flat slab construction starts at the bottom and builds up. When one floor is complete, concrete columns are poured to support the next floor. Inside the concrete and connecting the building's floors and columns are hundreds of steel rods known as rebar. To engineers, this mixture of concrete and steel is a marriage made in heaven.
It's one of God's gifts to the engineering world that steel and concrete have exactly the same coefficient of thermal expansion. You can put steel and concrete and heat them both and cool them both, and they expand uniformly. So the concrete doesn't crack off the steel or the steel doesn't pull out of the concrete. That's a miracle. You know, most people don't appreciate that. That is a miracle.
In flat slab construction, the weight or load of the floors is shared by the rebar and concrete in the columns. The columns then conduct the load of every floor to the ground. In a healthy building, the load can take many different routes to solid earth. These concrete and rebar columns are extremely strong and durable. The fatter the column is, the more load it can support. The ratios of column size to load are well known, and every flat slab building is designed with plenty of margin for error. There's no reason a flat slab building should ever collapse. And yet, one did. Why? The building's blueprints provide the first clue. It turns out Sampung's problems began as soon as construction started. At first, the owners planned to build an office building. But once construction got underway, they decided they wanted a shopping mall instead. When their builders refused to meet their demands, the owners fired them and handed the job over to their own construction company, which saw no problem with the new plans.
흔히 일어납니다. 그러나 그것은
Changing how a building is going to be used isn't really unusual.
전문가, 스트럭처 엔지니어의
But in the case of Sampung, the communication between architects and engineers was too casual.
백화점은 그런 것들이
That's a fundamental
상당히
mistake.
무시됐고 잘못돼도 많이 잘못된 것입니다.
To create open areas for merchandise, the new builders removed the dividing walls. Then they cut a shaft to install an escalator. And finally, they changed the size and shape of the support columns. In flat slab buildings like Sampung, the columns are crucial. But Sampung's designers didn't follow the standard load calculations. The design blueprints reveal the chilling details. The new builders reduced the size of the support columns by 25%, narrowing each one from 31 to 23 inches. Near the escalators, the builders cut the columns even more. Was that the reason Sampung collapsed? Was it possible one small change in an otherwise rock-solid design had cost so many people their lives? If so, it wouldn't be the first time. 1981, Kansas City, Missouri. The Hyatt Regency Hotel's lobby is crammed with couples for the Friday evening tea dance. Spectators on the lowest of the three skywalks followed the action below. There's no way the dancers can know that the building around them is fatally flawed, or that a single bolt is about to fail and usher in disaster.
Pop, pop. It sounds like metal hitting metal. Pop, pop.
The popping sound is a bolt experiencing a catastrophic failure. The topmost skywalk falls, smashes through the one beneath it, and hits the crowded dance floor. A 114 people are killed. Hundreds more are injured. It's the most disastrous structural failure of any building in U.S. history. TV reporter Michael Mahoney was filming at the Hyatt that night.
You believe that when you go into a building, that it's going to be relatively safe, that it's put together well. When something like this happens, it's a betrayal of trust.
So what exactly went wrong? After the collapse, engineer Wayne Lishka investigated the disaster for the Kansas City Star. He discovered that just like Sampong, a design change was made during construction. How the skywalks would hang from the ceiling. Instead of using one rod to hold both walkways, the builders used two, a modification that somehow never got tested.
This was something that was just so minor that nobody bothered to ever look at it. And they never looked at it from day one.
Over time, a rod that held the top skywalk to the ceiling began to tear into its base. Then, finally, slipped through.
Once the weld started to unzip, it just came down. That it unzipped the night of the tea dance was just chance. It could have unzipped 2 weeks after the thing were built, or it could have lasted another several years. It was an accident waiting to happen.
Sampong was also an accident waiting to happen. But the investigators aren't convinced the slimmed-down support columns were the building's only Achilles heel. To find out what else might have gone wrong, investigators calculate how much load the building was carrying. The results are stunning. Records show that the owners originally obtained a permit for a 4-story structure. But Sampong was 5 floors tall. The owners had added an entire 5th story, another 3,000 tons of concrete, without strengthening the support columns. And there was more weight to come. When the building opened, most of the 5th floor was leased to restaurants and their heavy kitchen equipment. Then, to accommodate traditional Korean eateries, the owners increased the 5th floor's load even more by installing heaters under the floor to keep customers comfortable. That meant adding an extra 1-foot-thick layer of concrete. Did all that extra weight on the column